God isn't real. There's no evidence for God, there's no proof for God. Every time I say this, someone comes at me with their proof and they need to read the dictionary and understand what the dictionary definition of proof is. It's very difficult to prove something. It's actually difficult to prove gravity, let alone God, which doesn't exist. You can't prove something that isn't there. God isn't there, so you haven't got proof for God. In fact, most of you don't even have evidence for God. Your evidence for God is always, well, I was in a car crash and I was supposed to die and I didn't die, or it's coincidences, it's feelings, it's personal experiences. None of those things are evidence. So what religious people do is when they try and get evidence for God is, they point at the lack of evidence for other things. They say, well, how did the universe get created? And I say, well, we don't know exactly. You don't know, so how else could it have been but God? And that's like me walking downstairs into my living room and there's a perfectly wrapped Christmas present. And someone goes, well, how did that get there? And I say, I don't know. And they say, well, it must have been Santa Claus. So, well, how do you know it's Santa Claus? Well, you don't know who else did it, so it's Santa. Lack of evidence or lack of proof in one direction does not instantly throw it in the direction you want it to go in. The crazy thing about religion is this. If everyone was forced to be atheist until the age of 30 and then was told the religious stories and had the choice then if they became religious or remained an atheist, nobody would be religious. The reason people continue to believe into the later ages is because they were indoctrinated and brainwashed as a child and they feel guilty giving it up. I know some very, very smart people who are still like, oh, well, I don't know. They're afraid to say God doesn't exist because as a child it was drummed into their brains that God is there. God is not there. I absolutely assure you God is not there. When I say this, another thing people come to me with is, well, prove he's not there. And this is the kicker. It's not my job to prove God doesn't exist. It's your job to prove he does exist. You are the one who believes, so you have the burden of proof. If God's real, and this is a huge if, because once again I'll reiterate, God is not real. If God's real, there's two things we need to look at here. One, he's trying exceptionally hard to conceal himself. I mean, this is God here. He's God, he can do anything. He tries exceptionally hard to conceal himself. And when I say this, religious people go, no, God's all around you. Look at a Coke bottle and the way the can, look at the stars. All garbage. You're looking at things with a pre-conclusive idea that God exists. You've already decided God exists. That's why you're looking at things and seeing God. Well, that's easy. But if you actually don't believe God exists and you're looking for God, he isn't there. Bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people far too often for God to exist. And when I say this, then the religious reply is, but God has a plan. No, he doesn't. And you know he doesn't, because if God has a plan, you wouldn't look both ways before you cross the road. You wouldn't put on your seatbelt. You wouldn't even pay your rent. Why? God has a plan. God's worked it all out for you. Why do you have to look both ways for cars? God decides if he wants you alive or not. Don't worry about it. Just walk out into the middle of the freeway. God has a plan. God hasn't got a fucking plan. And if he does have a plan, his plan is that the most religious countries in the world, the countries where the most people are religious, the biggest shitholes on this planet, his plan is to let them pray all day for basic human rights and basic human necessities and make sure he provides none of them. Let all the people who pray all day, praying to God for food, starve. And let all the people in the Nordics and Sweden and Norway, where no one believes in God, literally nobody, let them all be some of the richest, most wealthy countries on the planet. That's what God's decided to do. God's obviously decided to take the people who believe in him and punish them and let the people who don't believe live good lives. I'm going to correct myself. It's not very often I take back an opinion, but I'm gonna take back an opinion. If you look very, very early on in this channel to the depths of Tate speech, I think one of my earliest 10 Tate speeches was how God is not real. And I sat there and I explained how God's not real and don't believe in God and I'm an atheist and blah, blah, blah. But I want to change teams because I'm looking at these atheists and they're all just dorks or just nerds or, I mean, Christians are nerds too. It's hard. But all the complete degeneracy you see in the world nowadays is done in the name of atheism, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that some basic things like family, man, woman, children, etc., that only seems to be the religious people. Only religious people are propagating these ideals. Whereas the atheists are propagating insanity. Like, this gender fluid, crazy, pedophilia as a sexual orientation, just madness. So I don't want to be an atheist anymore. I look what the atheists are doing and they've just gone nuts. And the truth is that most people are not smart enough to be an atheist. Because as an atheist, what I did is I made myself the center of my universe. But most people are not
intelligent enough or capable enough to do that. Most people are so unremarkable, they cannot make themselves the center of their own universe because there's nothing interesting about them. So they have to find meaning elsewhere. And if they don't find meaning elsewhere with God, they end up signing up to a new religion, which is liberalism or leftism or wokeness. So people are always religious to something. And it turns out being religious to God is far better than being religious to any of the other options out there. All the other options on the table that society provides are terrible. So I've decided I no longer want to be an atheist. I'm going to start believing in God. Because if God keeps society together, even if God's not real, if enough people believe in a thing which makes society better, if enough people believe in a God which makes society, which is a net positive for society, then God in some form exists, doesn't he? So even if it's just the idea of him existing makes him semi-real. So I now believe in God. I believe in God. So now I have to decide which God I believe in. And there's lots of options, there's lots of choices. So for me, it's really down to two. Hindu, no. The Christians haven't been gangsta a long time. The Christians were gangsta. You couldn't mess with the Christians. Dose Vault, they come in, bust down, crusade, we're taking Jerusalem, bust places up. The Christians haven't done anything gangsta in a long time. If I had to bet on a religion, the same way I bet on a company, let's say you're going to put 100 grand into a company's stock and you had to bet on it going up or down, I'd have to bet on Islam. You can't fuck with Islam. You can't insult their prophets. You can't insult their gods. You insult their shit, they go rioting. They'll kill you. They'll chop your head off. You can insult Jesus all day. No one cares. All the churches in Europe are getting vandalized right now by Muslim immigrants, and the Christians don't even do anything. Imagine Christian immigrants in Saudi Arabia damaging the mosques. It would be going down. Crazy. So the Muslims, you don't mess with the Muslims. But then, do I really want to go full Muslim? I get a bunch of wives, which is cool. But what I'm thinking of doing is, coincidentally, I live in Romania, which is the most Christian country in the world, and it's Orthodox Christian. But Orthodox Christians, like the Russian, Greek, Romanian church, they still don't play games. You can't play games here. Recently, I read all the time on the news here in Romania about what the church is doing. And you can't piss off the church. You can't disrespect the church. Everyone respects the church here. No one vandalizes anything. The Orthodox Christians will still mess you up. So I think I'm no longer an atheist. I'm now an Orthodox Christian. And for that reason, I now go to church at least twice a week. I go to church twice a week, and I'm now a Christian. So there's no funny ha-ha at the end of this Tate speech. I just genuinely believe it's good for society, which means it has to be good for me. So I'm now a Christian. We all knew I was going to heaven anyway. Let's be honest.
Religion in and of itself is separate to God. However, religion in and of itself, do you believe that religion in and of itself is a force for good? Do you believe that religion...
I actually do, because my family, so I've got a family that's half Christian, half Muslim, and I respect the way they live is a lot better than the way I know most of my friends live.
Okay, correct. So, let me ask you another question. If 100 people believe in a God, and the God they believe in makes them act like better people, and they're better for the world.
Yeah.
Do you believe that their belief in God in and of itself makes God real? If God wants people to act in a righteous way, and people believe in God, and that makes them act righteously,
then I respect that.
Does that make God exist?
No.
In some form.
Not in any form.
Even as an idea.
As an idea?
Do you believe?
Yes.
Do you believe the idea of God makes people act more righteously?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so do you believe that God as a whole, even as an idea, him existing even as an idea, brings out the righteousness in humans?
Sure. Yeah, it does.
My question is, you say about real. You're talking about real.
Yeah.
I'm saying if somebody believes in God and they act righteously, is that righteousness real?
The way that acts is real.
Yeah.
Okay, so the righteousness is real.
Yeah.
And why are they acting righteously? Because of God, correct?
Well, because
of their belief in God.
Because of
belief
their
in God.
idea of God.
Okay, so they believe in God. Is their belief in God real?
Yes,
Their
absolutely.
belief is
Of course,
real, yeah.
you can't deny it.
So is God real?
No.
Yes, he is.
No, you will never be able to convince me that God is real.
My point is very simple. My point is, if you take X amount of people and they believe in God and they act righteously and they add good to the world because of their belief in God, then that makes God on some level even only as an idea, he is a real thing. Because
It-
ideas are real things. And that makes now.
You know what?
No,
I've got you. I know what
Ideas
you're
are real
talking
things. And let me ask another question then. Let me change it another angle. Do you believe that some of the things happening in the world today, whether it's Epstein's Island, whether it's code insanity, whether it's propagation of pedophilia, whatever, do you agree that there are some things in the world today which are the act of the devil? Do you
No.
believe that Satan, do you believe that people who believe in evil, do you believe that perversion, do you believe that genuine evil exists on the planet?
So are we saying that anytime something bad happens in the world, are we just going to say the devil, this is the devil's work?
No.
So if it was God being the almighty being,
Correct.
Surely he has a say in all this.
I understand your points. So let me ask it another way. Do you believe there is a force for perversion which is enacting its will upon the world today?
No.
I believe there is a force for evil. I
Okay.
believe there's a force for perversion.
Okay.
I believe there are people out there which are trying to spread evil ideas. I believe there are propagandists which are trying to purport negativity.
Yep.
I believe that a lot of the mainstream ideas and thoughts and considerations are deliberately perverse. And once you understand that there is a force for evil, then you must understand there's a force for good, and that force for good is God. Now, you're thinking of God as a man in the sky.
I don't think that,
okay.
actually.
You're thinking of God as a book.
No.
okay, well,
My idea of God is energy of the universe.
Okay, so I'm thinking
that's
of
what I
God.
believe in.
I'm thinking of God as a force for good. If you believe that there's an evil force which is doing this on purpose, then you would have to believe there's a positive force, and that positive force is God. Even if you don't believe in God, men who stand up and say no in and amongst themselves under the name of God makes God a real thing.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. I go to churches in Romania that are 5,000 years old. If you go to a building that is 5,000 years old, and for 5,000 years people have gone there and thought positive thoughts and prayed to an imaginary man called God under the name of positivity, do you believe that that makes God in and of itself, in that particular building, in and of itself, a real thing? When people go there and only positively think of one thing in and of itself.
yeah.
I understand your points of view. I want you to just, as I carry on, I want you to both know that I was an atheist, and I understand your points of view very, very well.
So you were like me.
Very well.
At one point.
Yeah, at one point. Let me ask you another question. In your mind, purely in your mind, what is the difference between a dream and a memory?
Attached to it.
You have
whether it be
senses attached to a memory, but you don't have a dream. But you don't with the dream.
No.
Yeah,
A
Correct.
dream is
Correct.
yeah.
Understood.
You don't want. I won't answer. that,
Understood.
so
But I'm
yeah,
saying if
yeah.
you remove the senses element, if you're sitting here and you're trying to remember a dream or you're trying to remember something that actually happened, what's the genuine difference?
Well, one that I lived through it and the other one I haven't
No,
lived through
you
it.
know that. I'm not asking that. I'm saying in your mind, in and of
Yeah.
itself, remember a dream and remember a real event. Do
Yep.
you remember them any differently?
Not really.
No, I
but
can't
one-
Not
remember
really.
a
It's
dream.
not really
No,
is the
it's-
true
no,
answer.
not really.
If it's cerebral, you can sit there and go, okay, that happened, that didn't happen.
A
That's
memory-
cerebral. I'm
a
not
me-
saying
I
that.
would
I'm
say a
saying
memory's more
remember
real.
it and try and experience it in your mind, and you will
Okay.
soon learn that
Doing
it's
it.
only the idea of things that make them real. Let me tell you something that you will not
Okay.
believe. I'll tell you something you will not believe.
Yeah.
People often ask me, especially when I put up a picture on Instagram, how I'm in such good shape. Say, how are you in such good shape when all you do is travel the world and drink alcohol and smoke cigars?
Their
You
idea
barely
of
go
it.
to the gym. And I say that I train in my sleep, and they call me crazy. Because I can lucidly dream, because I can control my dreams, which is another podcast in and of itself. I train in my dreams. I convince my mind that I've trained. I convince my mind that I need to be ready for war, and my body reacts accordingly. It is the ideas that are real. What do they say in the Matrix? The body cannot exist without the mind. It's the ideas that are real. An idea in and of itself is real enough. If you remember a dream the same way you remember a real event, they are basically the same. My body proves that because I do most of my training as I fucking sleep. If I believe in the idea of God, if millions of people believe in the idea of God, if millions of people do good things under the name of God, the same God, and they believe in him, and they pray to him, and they worship him, even if he's not a real person, as an idea in and of itself, it exists. And that idea which exists makes people act in the way in which God would want them to act, which makes God real. He may only be real as an idea, but that's real enough. You must understand. You're thinking of it as God as a person. You're thinking of it
Yeah, I
as the
get what you're
book.
saying.
You must think of it as an idea in and of itself. If the idea of God is adhered to, and that makes society act underneath God's will, then he is real. If the idea of evil is real, if the idea of perversion is real, then the opposite force must be real. This is Newton's second law. There must be an equal and opposite force. If there are people out there trying to do evil, there are people out there trying to do good. And when you find the people in the world who are trying to do the best for humanity, they're doing it under the name of what? God. He is a real thing because he is inspiring the resistance against the perversion of earth. And to sit here and say that God is not real, I understand your arguments.
Yeah.
The book is bullshit. He's not a person in the sky, blah, blah, blah.
I don't
You're
really think
thinking very one-dimensional.
I'm not
You're
in the
not
person
thinking
in the sky thing. I'm not really on that idea. I'd never thought that anyway.
You need to think beyond that and understand that all the perversion, all the negativity on the planet is being resisted under the name of one person.
Yeah.
And if that person
the idea of God.
If that person is an idea,
That's
which is
it.
God,
That is-
then God exists.
That is the best
I
way
get it.
anybody has ever put it towards me, by the way.